as you pick your stock, you're ideally going to want pieces with grain that is straight and continuous. So what I mean by that is, as you can see here, the lines go from end to end without running off to the sides. What's more important than the face in which the bend happens is the side, because that's where the stress will be the most. And even on the side, you can see the grain is pretty straight and continuous. You want to check the opposite side as well. Here's an example of one that's not ideal. As you can see, because this piece was near a knot, the grain is wild. And although it's a little harder to decipher because this is a flat cut face, and you don't get straight lines, you can assume that it's not very continuous. That's where the piece came from. I would try and avoid using something like this unless I had to. So in an ideal world, we'd be using air-dried lumber because it steam bends much better. Unfortunately, that stuff is very difficult to come around. And so in order to compensate for the fact that we're using kiln-dried lumber, I'm going to be liberally coating our pieces in a surfactant. And what this will do is it'll make it easier for the piece to absorb moisture via steam and thus absorb heat more evenly. And the surfactant we're going to be using is just plain old Downy Free and Gentle. And yeah, I'll demonstrate how to do that. You might want to use gloves for this. I am not going to bother. Yep. Now I'll go wash my hands. Now I'm putting the pieces in the poly tubing. You want to make sure that there's not too much soap around the edge there. All right, first seal. Just want to make sure that it's working despite the soap. Yeah, it looks like it's working pretty well. Now the second seal. All right. Before we get to making steam, I'll just quickly break down my entire steam bending setup. I've got 2 Wagner wallpaper steamers, 2 little sawhorses to prop up my piece so that I can put a drainage hole on the bottom and have it drain into a basin below. I've got just some scissors ready to cut the hole that'll receive the tubing from the wallpaper steamers. And good to have some paper towels handy in case there are leaks anywhere. Now, the reason I have 2 wallpaper steamers is I was using just one initially, and I found that 2 is a lot more effective in terms of producing a lot more heat so you don't have to wait as long, and enough pressure in the tube itself. You want a little bit of pressure, at least more than atmospheric, because the pressure will help the steam enter the pores of the wood. So I recommend having 2 steamers, especially for something thick like this. Just cut off a corner a bit bigger than the steamer tube, and then put that in there. You want to make sure it's nice and tight, so give it a tug. Make sure it's not loose anywhere. And you've got leftover plastic all around. And then do the same for the other side. It sounds like we've got a bit of a leak on the side, because there's quite a bit of steam coming out of there. Yep, it's leaking, so I'm gonna have to set that up again. For my second attempt, what I ended up having to do is use a pair of scissors and just snip a tiny little hole like that underneath. And that worked as a much better regulator than the needle holes. The needle holes were not enough, but it's looking stable. And I'll check back on this in 4 hours. Success! And it's still steaming, at least partially. So it's now been exactly a week since I steam bent these two parts. They are meant to be armrests for a chair that I'm working on. Here's the seat right here. And as you'll be able to see, the moisture content is very close to the control. Now, the surprising thing about the polytubing technique for steam bending has been, as far as I've seen, there's no spring back, which is when a steam bent piece will flex a little bit towards its original shape. It's a common phenomenon with regular steam box steam bending. That with the polytube method, you get virtually no spring back. These were tight before, and in fact, compared to the form, I had made it tighter by about 1/4 inch, and they've managed to stay that way once dry. So to demonstrate that that's the original form that I used for steam bending, and now they don't fit on them anymore. So a real advantage to the polytube technique is that you can get an exact diameter and you don't have to guess what kind of spring back you'll have on your piece.